I always following the lead that my other officials give me. So everything Bob Sudinger said about this is my personal opinion does not represent the position of the United States government and should not be misinterpreted to represent the position of the United States government is exactly what I meant to say. And I'd like to thank you, and thank you, Madam President, for inviting us and inviting me here today. And I'm going to continue for a moment with that idea of speaking personally. And I have to tell you that for me, personally, Thanksgiving is a feast that makes me always think of Taiwan. And that's true. Because 37 years ago on Thanksgiving, I was part of a group of American students in a bus going from Taipei, where we were studying Chinese, down to Lugang to look at the village in the old city. And there we were about to get off the bus, and there's this whole bunch of turkeys, literally crowding around the bus, gobbling and gobbling. And we finally decided they were gloating. They were laughing at us, saying, okay, you Americans think you're getting turkey dinner. Not these turkeys. No, well, we're safe. What makes it even more important to me is that was my first date with my new girlfriend. And so it was a day that was important to me, and I hope to her, because we've been friends ever since. We've been married for 33 years, and so it's a wonderful event for me. And I also recall the politics of that time. Martial law, people imprisoned on Orchid Island for political speech, for honesty, for patriotism. There was fear and visceral anger between Taiwanese and mainlanders, and now I can even see what I'm reading. Street vendors, you may remember, in Taipei sold banned books. They had histories of China in simplified characters. They actually even sold books on the environment. And they ran away whenever the garrison command police walked near. And the ban on history books seems understandable in retrospect. The ban on environmentalism, perhaps less so. But the authorities feared environmentalism signaled an excessive attachment to Taiwan, and therefore a lack of commitment to China and reunification. It was a strange and in many ways a sad time. I remember going back to Taiwan in 1987 and discovering that already both mainland history textbooks and environmental textbooks were openly sold in bookstores. And I didn't realize what was going to happen in the next few years, that we were going to see two Taiwanese presidents elected, one from the Kuomintang and the other one from the Minjintang. Now, I know there are many different opinions and perhaps even many causes for dissatisfaction about these two presidents and these two parties. And as I was saying to someone a few moments ago, I don't vote there, so I'm not going to get into that. But I think we should pause for a moment to acknowledge what a dramatic turn to democracy their elections proved to be, and acknowledge how much Taiwan has changed. We need only look across the Taiwan Strait, as Bob was doing a few moments ago, to appreciate the scale of that change. It did not come easily, and it did not come for free. Many of you and many others like you took real risks and endured real suffering to make that change possible. And before I go any further, let me just express my admiration and thanks for what you and others like you have done to create the Taiwan we know and honor today. I'm not going to discuss those events further. Many of you know them far better and more intimately than I do. Nor will I argue that Taiwan's democracy is the best possible. There's always room for improvement in every democracy, and it is the duty of citizens and their friends to fight for those improvements. Instead, I would like to talk a little bit about the American government perspective as I understand it, and the challenges that lie in front of us for all who love Taiwan. And I'm actually going to try to do this without using the word status quo. I'm sort of doing that as a little challenge to myself. And we may not always agree as we go forward, and I look forward to discussing our disagreements. But I believe firmly that I and my colleagues who work on Taiwan and China policy as U.S. government officials and as U.S. government political leaders have pursued a strongly pro-Taiwan policy, and we will continue to do so. We pursue that pro-Taiwan policy because the United States and Taiwan are bound by common interests and common values, and you've heard that before. What we say less often, but in my mind is equally true, is we are bound by a very strong mutual affection. We are more than partners. We are at heart part of one family. Americans feel an emotional tie to Taiwan. It is a tie that is hard to quantify, but also hard to overstate. But let me give you one small example. Garrett mentioned that I'm involved in teaching young Foreign Service officers, and it's just great fun to meet with these younger, up-and-coming government officials who know so much more about Taiwan and China than I did when I was starting, and are so enthusiastic about what they're doing. But I was talking to one of them, and he had spent a number of years on the mainland studying Chinese and working in business. A few years ago, he went to Taiwan to live. And he found himself walking around Taipei saying to himself, this is such an amazing place. It's so different from the mainland. In terms of general prosperity, yes, that's true. But more important, he said, it just felt different. It felt freer, it felt happier, it felt more open. And that, to me, sort of captures what I'm trying to get at. With those common bonds of interest, values, and affection, what we have done, what have we done, and what do we do now? What have we done? First of all, we have protected Taiwan. Virtually alone among all countries, the United States has supplied Taiwan with the equipment and training to build a self-defense capability. We've done this intensively, not in some offhand fashion. In addition to supplying Taiwan with equipment, our best military minds travel regularly to Taiwan to discuss how it can defend itself more effectively. We've provided this equipment and training and advice despite repeated threats from China. Almost every month, it seems, China warns in some way that the United States will pay a price. We will lose some access to China unless we abandon Taiwan. And every month for 35 years, we have rejected that warning. And we will continue to do so. Are there expensive systems that Taiwan announces it would like to buy, but the United States does not approve? I'm thinking at the moment of advanced fighters, and yes, there are. Equally, there are less expensive things that U.S. military experts conclude Taiwan could do to strengthen its self-defense that it does not fund. Why? It leads some of them to wonder, would Taiwan increase its military budget enough to pay for those advanced fighters if the U.S. agreed to sell them? And many doubt it. If they did increase the budget, most military experts will tell you that there are better ways Taiwan could spend its self-defense dollars. Now, I suspect this is a point on which some of you will disagree with me, and I look forward to discussing those disagreements with anyone who'd like to in a little while. But let me step back and offer two overall observations. First, Beijing's push to expand its Navy began in 1996. Why? Because the U.S. Navy put 2 aircraft carriers off the north and south tips of Taiwan in response to Chinese missile tests. Beijing believed then, and still believes today, it must defeat the U.S. Navy to attack Taiwan. Second, U.S. military experts have said that the Chinese People's Liberation Army does not believe it is capable of seizing Taiwan. Why? Because of U.S. support for Taiwan. And to me, there is the bottom line. Now let's turn from security to other issues. Over the years, we have supported Taiwan's prosperity. The U.S. brought Taiwan into the World Trade Organization. We did that because Taiwan requested that in 1992. In fact, the State Department received Taiwan's formal request on the first day that I sat down as the deputy director of our Taiwan office. And I looked at that request and I thought, okay, for the next 2 years, I'm going to have enough to do. And I did. We also supported Taiwan's WTO application for very simple, practical economic reasons. Taiwan is one of the world's most effective, most dynamic, and open economies. It is a natural member of the WTO. We supported Taiwan's membership despite Beijing's opposition. In fact, we were only able to do it because the United States informed China very clearly that China would only join the WTO if Taiwan did. And not quite as widely known, we did exactly the same thing to bring Taiwan into the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, or APEC. And that's why a Taiwan representative is going to Beijing for the APEC meetings this coming week. On a third subject, the U.S. has pushed Taiwan, sometimes too quietly perhaps, to become more democratic. Our colleagues in the U.S. Congress were at the forefront of that issue, of that effort, insisting that the nationalist government of the 70s and 80s could not remain authoritarian if it wanted U.S. support. The most recent element in U.S. support for Taiwan and for stability in the Asia-Pacific region has been what we have called the rebalance or the pivot, or there may be still another name for it that I've missed. Whatever you call it, this rebalance is a renewal of the United States' commitment to be a constructive, stabilizing, and democratic presence in the Pacific. Now, a lot of what we have done was institutionalized in the Taiwan Relations Act, which was passed 35 years ago, after the United States broke relations with the Republic of China and established relations with the People's Republic of China. And just another personal footnote. I was a graduate student walking down Xinqiang Nanlu with my girlfriend, watching the first free election campaign for Taipei City Council on Saturday, December 15th, when the decision of President Carter to recognize the PRC was announced. I watched the election banners turned over and anti-American slogans written on the back. And I got some really good Chinese language practice because I was riding around in taxis and the taxi drivers were lecturing me, maybe berating me is the better term, about how they felt about the United States. And it got to a point where they were turning around and yelling at me. And finally, my girlfriend had the presence of mind to say to one taxi driver, look, just pull over to the side of the road. We'll say anything you want to say about the United States, and then could you face forward and drive us safely home? Now, I understand the anger that those taxi drivers felt. And I understand that that anger is still felt over that U.S. decision. However, in the intervening years, the United States has insisted on working with Taiwan in ways that have enabled Taiwan to build a stable, open society and economy. Taiwan has benefited from access to the mainland economy as well, to become one of the great high-tech economies of our time. And this has not been lost on people in the mainland, either those in power or those who want to see the structure of power change. However imperfect Taiwan's democracy may be, Every time the Nationalist Party, the Kuomintang, competes against the Democratic Progressive Party or Minjindang in an election, like the 9-in-1 elections that will happen later this month, it scares the living daylights out of the communist leadership in Beijing. If the nationalists, their old foes in the Chinese Civil War, can compete in real elections with complete social and political stability, why can't the Communist Party do the same? If the Beijing authorities feel anxiety, many others in Beijing feel hope every time Taiwan goes to the polls. The Taiwan Relations Act made this possible because the United States Congress insisted that the Taiwan Relations Act would be more than a bill to fund AIT, the American Institute in Taiwan. They insisted it would be a commitment to Taiwan, and it was. The Congress insisted that the United States would continue to support Taiwan's self-defense, commit to be ready to come to Taiwan's assistance in its self-defense, and commit to having an ongoing relationship with Taiwan. For 35 years, the Congress has insisted that each administration honor these commitments or it would cut the budget. Money talks, democracy works, and every administration has supported Taiwan. But beyond that threat, every administration has actively looked for ways to strengthen American support for Taiwan in ways both practical and symbolic. And I just want to flag for you, if I may, one symbol that I think will be a very important one and a very obvious one. Many of you know well the AIT headquarters on Xinilu in downtown Taipei, that old military compound that was falling apart in 1979 and that AIT has used as its office buildings ever since. Well, we're about to abandon that, close it, and move into a beautiful new facility out in Neihu. It will be one of the finest representative diplomatic compounds that the United States has anywhere in the world. And it is and that new facility is the product of a lot of working level stiffs like Bob and like me, and a number of officials from administrations of both political parties who insisted that we would build it, and we had to build it. Whether we called it a chancery or an embassy or whatever you wanted to call it, we were going to see it built. Now, with these remarks and how far we have come together, I'd like to offer some personal comments and recommendations on what we might and should do. And these, as we said a moment ago, are my personal opinions. Have we done enough? No. Has Taiwan done enough? I'm going to say again, no. We need to work together to ensure that Taiwan has the same practical access to organizations promoting practical international cooperation as the United States or any other international player. Specifically, Taiwan and the United States need to work so that Taiwan has effective access to the World Health Organization, or the WHO, as well as the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO. And these are two of these alphabet soup organizations that the UN is so good at. But they have real practical benefits for all of the world and all of their members. They work on issues that will affect the lives of the people in Taiwan and the success of its economy. And the US government must push for this practical access despite any symbolic or nomenclature roadblocks that Beijing or its friends throw up. Taiwan must send to these organizations representatives expert in their work and avoid giving Beijing easy opportunities to create these symbolic and nomenclature roadblocks I just mentioned. So that's something we haven't done. Now let me turn to 4 items that are on my personal agenda for the United States and Taiwan. First of all, the most important single step that we can take to support Taiwan's economic prosperity and its security is to ensure that Taiwan is part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is an economic trade organization that the United States has begun negotiating with a number of other partners across the Pacific. We actually started out, the original 4 members were Chile, New Zealand, Singapore, and Brunei, a small core group, but it's turning into a very important organization, we hope, that will provide greatly expanded trade and investment relations among the most dynamic economies on the globe, and that includes Taiwan. It could be the bedrock for a new era of prosperity in the Asia-Pacific region. Now, there will be some who will say that Taiwan should not be part of that new organization. Nonsense. Now, the tough part. Like it or not, China will do anything necessary to ensure that Taiwan is not part of the formal negotiating process for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That is annoying, even infuriating, but it is reality. Now, Taiwan has some of the best economic minds and some of the best trade negotiators in the Asia-Pacific. And they, with U.S. cooperation and support, must find ways around those roadblocks and position Taiwan to be a full part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership when it comes into force. Now, of course, Taiwan will have to do its part by also undertaking economic reforms to increase its global competitiveness. Some of these reforms may be difficult, but they build on Taiwan's already considerable economic abilities, and ultimately they will boost, yet again, Taiwan's competitiveness and make it an even more attractive global and regional partner. Nothing that Taiwan can do or the United States can do with Taiwan is more important to Taiwan's future prosperity and security than this. Second, Taiwan finds itself positioned between 2 of the most pressing security challenges in the Asia-Pacific today: the Senkaku Diaoyutai Islands to its north and the South China Sea to its south. Taiwan must be a constructive partner to all parties who insist these disputes be resolved peacefully. Taiwan should reach out quietly to other claimants to find ways to cooperate in discouraging any use of force. And the United States should work to ensure that Taiwan and other parties are prepared to cooperate together defensively if that should become necessary. My third item may be less obvious, but I believe it is still important. Taiwan's citizens and friends will rightly press for Taiwan to be a stronger, more transparent, and less corrupt democracy. But we should be supporting Taiwan's democracy as it is and as it grows, and offering that as an example of how democracy can thrive and grow even in difficult circumstances. You can be sure that there are plenty of people on the mainland who know all about the sunflower movement and frankly envy it. And it is in U.S. national interest that they envy it. And my final agenda item is this. As the relationship between China and Taiwan grows fuller every day, the United States government stresses that we welcome closer ties in business and people-to-people relations, that we welcome increasing visits by officials across the Taiwan Strait. And all of that is good and reasonable. It's the kind of talking points I used to write when I was doing that job. However, we must insist that these potentially beneficial ties not become a way for the mainland to put pressure on Taiwan, whether direct or indirect, whether against Taiwan government officials or Taiwan businesses on the mainland, or against Taiwan businesses in Taiwan. So there are my thoughts. I served as a U.S. diplomat for 30 years, and diplomacy is a business for optimists, and I am an optimist. But no one ever said that diplomacy was the art of the perfect. It is the art of the possible. And our job is to expand what is possible. Now, I close with a confession, okay? I am a lousy singer. Every time they talk about karaoke, I sort of duck under the table. But I do know a fair number of popular songs, and there's one I'd like to mention, and yes, I'll admit, it's from a few years ago. It's a Rolling Stones song, and it's called You Can't Always Get What You Want. Anybody? There are people here who could sing that for me, right? Yep. Yeah, I've seen a couple of hands come up. And the chorus begins, you can't always get what you want. Not everybody remembers the next line. But if you try sometime, you may find you get what you need. I'm an optimist. I believe that line can be true for Taiwan. If we try all the time, if we work together, we can ensure that Taiwan gets what it needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, for your inspiring words, for your sense of history and personal feeling that you put into it. It was really great to hear that. Hear you talk about the dramatic turn towards democracy in Taiwan, the account of what the US has done, and also your very positive outlook. Bob, thank you very much for your dose of realism. I think that is also essential to take on board as we move on. So we thank you for your insights and your personal contribution. Thanks to people like you, we are where we are right now, and we need people like you with vision to move forward for Taiwan. So in an old Taiwanese expression, I'd like to say Lolat. That means thank you. So with that, I turn it back to President Huang for your final words.
Thank you very much for being here celebrating Thanksgiving with us. And I know it's a kind of past the schedule that's supposed to do. So I know there's a Q&A, but because we have kind of run out of the time, so the Q&A, let's move to the other room, continue the same topic, discussion, and Q&A. I guess I talked too much.